Well, hello, everybody. My name is Will Marsh. I'm the Director of Clinical Education here at Premier Research Labs, and I'm so excited to be joined on this Premier Living podcast episode with our clinical advisor, Dr. Kelly Halderman. Dr. Kelly, it's so great to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing well. Nice to see you too, Will.
Awesome. Well, we are excited to actually be jumping into our Premier Longevity panel, which has been several months in the making, but even longer than that, we've been really eyeing here at Premier Research Labs, building and bringing out a longevity and testing panel, just given kind of where the industry is at and how practitioners are looking into their clients. But Kelly, I would love for our audience today or to wherever they're listening, actually to dive into why we wanted to bring this panel to the market, given where practitioners are and what they're looking at.
Yeah, I think longevity is really something that is on all of our minds. It feels like every time I open up any social media, we're talking about longevity, and that's great. And I've always been interested in preventing disease before we get there to the end game. And so our CEO, Nick Glebinski, called me up one day and said he would like my assistance with building a genetic longevity panel. And I was elated because for so long I had wanted to do this. And this is because I had read two papers, which are about the hallmarks of aging. And so when I initially found these papers, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the keys to the biohacking universe, because the 12 hallmarks tell us the processes by which we age. It's like what we're trying to fight against when we're designing our biohacking or longevity strategies. And as I'm reading deeper into the papers, I was looking and again, I've read them many, many times, and I noticed that it was defining the processes again, the findings, right? So like telomere attrition. So, okay, my telomeres are getting shorter. Okay, we see that. Or mitochondrial dysfunction. Okay, we can do testing and show that people's mitochondria are dysfunctioning, but it didn't give us like the playbook, right? Or like how to stop it or really slow it up. And most importantly, it didn't give us that personal susceptibility, because there's 12 of them. So I was always like, why doesn't someone look at the genetics behind these 12 hallmarks and tell us which one or more are we susceptible personally? And so it really reminded me when I was a family practice doc long ago, and we would diagnose someone with something like multiple sclerosis, and we'd see the MRI and we'd see the findings, and we're like, there it is. There's the pathognomonic findings. You have MS. But what we really didn't get to is the root cause, and we didn't really help that person, because it's like we were showing them what we're seeing. And again, I wanted to know the root cause. I wanted to know the susceptibility. And so that's why I think that it was an amazing coincidence that, and there are no coincidences, right? That Nick had called me and asked me to help work on this, because again, if you leave these 12 hallmarks to their own devices, especially if you have genetic susceptibility in one or more, then you pave the way for the 4 horsemen of death to come riding in. And, we know those as cardiovascular disease, cancer, metabolic disease, and neurodegenerative diseases. And I was so excited for Nick to give us the opportunity to work with ExtendME to really define the personal susceptibility behind why we're aging.
Yeah, I think it's something really interesting to kind of maybe digress into is, the aspect that people talk about healthspan and they talk about how to live a healthier life, but they don't really define the key like hallmarks, right? And this is what the 12 hallmarks of age are, of like what really are indicators of like healthspan and aging and longevity. And well, now we have 2 wonderful tests that can help you understand how your body's performing on those hallmarks, and then really give you what you said so eloquently, a playbook as to how you can then start to support the body. So it's really, really exciting. Would you mind actually defining those hallmarks, or just kind of going through those briefly so everybody knows what we're talking about here?
Yeah. So the Hallmarks of Aging originally were published in 2013 by Dr. Carlos Otin and his team in the journal Aging. And so after that, we had 9 hallmarks. And then in 2023, he added 3 more. So we get a total of 12. So the original 9 were genetic instability, telomere attrition, loss of proteostasis, loss of nutrient sensing, regulation. We have mitochondrial dysfunction. We have stem cell exhaustion and cellular senescence. Okay, so you have those 9. And then 2023 comes along and he adds chronic inflammation, which is like, I think everybody knows that, inflammation drives aging. So it's great. He brought that in, as well as autophagy. So autophagy is our cellular cleaning. And in 2016, a researcher by the name of Dr. Otsumi had won the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine for discovering the cellular cleaning, this autophagy. So very cool that he put that in there. And then the last one is dysbiosis. And we all know that really health starts in the gut. And so how important this hallmark is, of course. But those hallmarks, again, they define that intricate biology, the biological processes of how and why we're aging. And so when you kind of go through them, number one, so genetic instability. So again, our genes, your DNA, beautiful, and we have it for life. That's our blueprint. And it's very susceptible to injury. And the American Aging Federation says that our DNA is damaged 1 million times per day, right? So that's some issues, but we have a built-in mechanism to help repair it, which is great, but it can only go so far. So we end up with genetic and genomic instability, where genes they're just not the same from all the insults. And then telomere attrition. So telomeres are those little shoelace caps at the end of our chromosomes, and every time our cells have to divide, they actually will get shorter. And so we're seeing cell stress, or they're just going to hit a limit. And that's that Hayflick limit where they're not replicating, the cell is. And then you look at the telomeres and they're very, very short. Do you want me to keep going? Or do you want to talk about any of those?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that we could honestly, each one of those could be its own little segment.
I know, right?
'Cause there's just so much juice in regards to how you can approach that and clinically why it's relevant. What I think is really beautiful about this test is it kind of gives you a risk assessment of the body as to which of these hallmarks, as a practitioner or as a client of a practitioner you may want to work with or work on, because based on your genetics, this is what you're maybe that's going to be your weakest link. And so talk to us a little bit, because you spent a lot of time selecting each individual SNP and really building this panel with our wonderful partner, ExtendME. So talk to me about how you actually went through the process of building this panel, because it's truly beautiful. And it looks at, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, around 120, 122 different SNPs in the body. Is that correct?
Yep, just about. That's about right. Yep. So really, it was a labor of love. And I had a terrific team at PRL and ExtendME, worked with a geneticist, and I told her what I was thinking, and she immediately was like, yes, that's a brilliant idea. I can't believe anyone hasn't thought of that yet. It's so novel, but yet it applies to all of us. And so we went through the GWAS data, which is genetic data that you can see risk assessments, you can see all the genes that are involved in all kinds of different things, like methylation, some things that we really know about. But what we did is we divided the hallmarks into 2 categories. And so we have our basic panel, and then we have our advanced panel. And so really when we're looking at the panels, we divided them out because there's too much data. We really needed to flesh them out in each area we could elaborate then. And I've been a practitioner for a long time. I've seen a lot of different genetic testing and reports. And I feel like after I've done about 12 of these, I really know how to really design an incredible report. That's very call to action. So let's talk about the basic panel. So again, based on the hallmarks of aging. So we look at 4 different areas. So the first one in the basic panel is biological aging and adaptation, which includes that genetic instability, that genomic instability, and telomere attrition. And it also defines how likely you are to be susceptible to the environmental toxins in our food, in our water, in our air, which is so relevant right now. And the second one in that category is mitochondrial dysfunction. So really, I think everybody understands by now from 10th grade biology, mitochondrial, the powerhouses of the cell. but they're also involved in cell signaling and metabolic homeostasis. So really important to just look and see if you have susceptibility to this, because your mitochondria, they run the show. And then this third category in the basic panel is chronic inflammation. So we know inflammaging is that new term in the past couple of years that we're hearing more and more about. And of course, when you have chronic inflammation going on in your body, that's a huge risk factor. But just imagine that this hallmark for you, or for your client, for your practitioner, for your patient, imagine that this one is really driving your aging. So you have to be extremely proactive in every which way that inflammation is happening in your body. And again, I think when we hear the hallmarks, we're like, okay, that makes sense. But it's like, where do we start, or which one do we focus on? So again, that's the beauty of this panel. It's telling you, of course, you need to have great foundational health, sleep, stress, diet, all those things. You can't skip over that, right? But then what can we do? What can we do in addition to that? So let's just take chronic inflammation. So if we're looking at a person, let's say I have SNPs and I have major issues in chronic inflammation being something I have to definitely keep my eye on. So in the report, it will give us nutritional information, and these are all based on clinical papers, clinical research, not preclinical. I'm a stickler about that. We don't want to see what was great for a rat. We want to see what worked in a human. So your report will include laboratory assessments too. So if you'd like to take the next step and you want to dig in and see with labs how bad this chronic inflammation may or may not be, that's a great strategy as well. If you just want to go ahead and start to try and get on top of it, which I think that this is a great strategy and it's in the report, we can use things like our Premier fermented turmeric and ginger, amazing anti-inflammatory, glutathione, our inflammacidin, our allicin with that garlic in there. I think those are complete rock stars when it comes to helping with inflammation. So those are the things that I call your non-negotiables. Those are the ones where we just don't say, oh, okay, I'm treating everything the best that I can for prevention. We really lock in on the hallmarks, again, that would be causing someone to age. And it's not about aging externally, like looking great. Now that's great, but like looking inside, we're really looking inside because we want to prevent things that will eventually take us down. So I'll just finish up with the basic panel. So we have the microbial ecosystem disruption, so dysbiosis. And again, if this is one of your issues, if this is driving your aging even more so, you have to be so proactive. You really need our probiotics, and we have many amazing probiotics, prebiotics. We have our aloe, galactan, and test your gut. Work with a practitioner. If you are a practitioner, if you see this on a report, take it a little bit more seriously, that this is something that they have a weakness toward, and let's not let it be. Let's really get on top of it and be proactive.
That's I love the way this was designed, actually, with the basic and then the advanced, because it really fits into our philosophy as a brand, where you're really understanding from a grassroots level what is that weakest link from just in a bioterrain perspective of like what's going to cause accelerated aging more rapidly, right? Whether that's the environment and toxin exposure, there's the gut, which we're so big on here, and just really ensuring that you have a healthy digestive process, because that really ensures the terrain of the body is well nourished. The fires of the body, which is inflammation, is at a low level, manageable level. I mean, inflammation is important for health, but it can't be chronic, right? And so, I think it's so beautiful that you work to design this panel in that way, because that basic panel gives you so much information, right? And then now talk to us a little bit about the advanced. That's where we're taking the kind of that next level and really diving into some of that more, advanced markers.
Yep. So advanced, we have over 60 SNPs, so a couple more than the basic. And again, 4 areas. So the first area is epigenetic clocks and age acceleration, which is going to include the hallmarks of cellular senescence, altered intercellular communication. So basically your cells aren't talking to each other very well, which causes a lot of issues. Stem cell exhaustion and epigenetic alteration. So that's all lumped into that epigenetic clocks and age acceleration. Number 2 is autophagy, which is a major issue for me, maybe TMI, but I really am not good at cellular cleaning, and autophagy is so important. I always used to tell my patients, like, think of little tiny vacuums in your body, that are cleaning up all that cellular debris, the toxic aggregates, the proteins that we don't need anymore. Well, when that's not working very well, it's related to the diseases such as like Lyme disease, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. And it really does make sense that we want to hone in on this one if this is one of our issues. We were just at the biohacking conference, Will and I, and people from PRL, and I had the audience put their hands up in the air and look at the back of their hands. And what we're looking for are solar lentigo, which are age spots, right? And so you can kind of look and gauge your autophagy with how many age spots you have. And I always tell the story that when I had Lyme disease back in 2012, I was just covered in these age spots on the back of my hands, my face, and people would be like, what's wrong? Like behind my back, what's wrong with her? And it was really this autophagy. And so when I learned about this autophagy, I'm like, I'm going full bore. I'm going right in and at this. And so you can use fasting. There's a lot of PRL nutrition too that you can help really reverse this. And so I don't have any age spots left. I mean, I have pictures of this too. I went and looked back at it, but are things like our turmeric is really great for autophagy activation potential. So is our resveratrol. And this one too kind of does actually play into superficial, right? So beauty from external things. So you can look at using like our collagen as well, our skin, hair, and nails. Our vitamin C is also really important. But I really do think that autophagy is something that just don't let it go, because it does lead in literature to some nasty neurological diseases. So the third category in this advanced panel is proteostasis imbalance and cellular stress. And then the fourth is nutrient sensing deregulation. So you're really looking deeper. You're looking at nutrient sensing could be your magnesium, your blood glucose. There's some SNPs in there where I found out that I do have some issues, even more so, like, because we're aging, right? So these hallmarks of aging are pushing it, but mine's like going 90 miles an hour in this nutrient sensing for blood sugar. And so I have my CGM on now because I did this panel and I was like, oh, wow, I really need to stay on top of this. And so I think that's just a great insight for me to stay on top of it. And it's prevention. But when you don't know, when you have to guess and you have a suitcase full of supplements and you're trying to do everything, that's where this report really helps you simplify. It helps you know personally what's for you, what's for your patient, what are your non-negotiables. And I think that's so powerful.
I agree. And it's I think it's something we work with some practitioners that have maybe never used genetics in their practice. And, they may do labs, they may do functional labs, they may look at the readout and they may see, chronic inflammation. And they may work to combat that, but they might not understand from a root cause factor what genetically is actually kind of fueling that fire. And I think that's important because, and maybe you can elaborate in your own experience, because different SNPs may start to code for different methods to how you can actually better support that process, right? Because, there's general anti-inflammatories, but, based on the SNP and the risk, you might actually do a completely different strategy. Does that resonate with you?
Right. And exactly, like, let's say that the inflammation on the lab is actually coming from that dysbiosis because they have this huge risk in dysbiosis or this blood sugar dysregulation or, magnesium levels and all that. So it's kind of, it really helps you be more effective. It helps you save money for your patients to really look and see what can be driving all these things. So of course you can do a ton of labs, but this is like one step further into the susceptibility so that you have a better idea. It's like putting on some glasses and being able to see the whole picture better and be able to see your patient's genetic predispositions. And so when then you're choosing labs and you're looking at them, you may have a whole new perspective on where to go. And sometimes it's confusing, even when you have all these labs. It's like, well, where's this coming from? And where is this coming from? And if Of course, we want to be conservative with doing labs and doing testing, but I really think that the panel, once you see that, you will have suggestions on labs. You'll have suggestions on dietary interventions. And so those are all, again, clinically researched. You'll have different therapies, perhaps, that you'd want to recommend, again, specifically within those genetic risk factors. And then, too, supplements, too. So Premier Nutrition, we can get very specific on the nutrition that the person needs. Of course, all of our nutrition is amazing, right? So, but kind of narrowing it down for people, I think people get a little bit of pill fatigue and protocol fatigue. And that's where we haven't never been a company about protocols. We're really about individuals, the bio-individuality of this. And this just brings us to another level. And lastly, I'll just say is that if you've never done genetics, that's why it was great that I've done so many genetic panels and I've helped to create panels. And I know what it's like to be a practitioner who doesn't know a lot about genetics. And so I wanted to really make it so that you don't have to know anything about genetics. You really just run the panel. So it's a saliva collection. It's 2 mLs. It's a very small amount. And then you're going to send it in and you're going to get this report. And again, the report it does explain the genes. It does explain what that SNP means. It does explain a little bit in depth about it, but you don't have to know that because we'll just cut to the chase and we'll show you on there the hallmarks and how at risk your patient is, your client is, of having this hallmark just speeding along way too fast. And then right after that, we'll have the nutrition, again, the Purell supplements, laboratory evaluation, and other lifestyle interventions that you can apply. And then your patient and your client is looking at this going, wow, this is for me. This is actually designed around my genetics. And I think that is really powerful too.
Yeah, I love, once again, I'm just going to keep echoing how much I love that, how this is designed, because truthfully, a practitioner could come in and build their entire practice around this longevity panel. Like you can come in and you can basically create modules on how you're then working to really start to build a longevity program that's personalized for that individual client. And we of course have protocols here at Premier, but we are more so about personalization and true personalization, right? With the recommendations we make. And so the beauty with this panel is it's personalized to their DNA, right? There's nothing else going. It's that person's individual DNA and it's their SNPs, and it's saying, based on this hierarchy, you're going to be more at risk here, here, here. Let's build strategies that are really customized based on your lifestyle, your diet, your needs, for how we can start to maybe unwind that. And so once again, Kelly, great job. What I wanted to maybe ask, and this is based on your experience and just the landscape of genetic testing and the work you've already done with, other panels perhaps, but talk to us a little bit about the landscape of genetics and why wouldn't somebody use, let's just say, a different company's generic test, right? And obviously we've defined it with the hallmarks of aging, but let's say there is a panel that maybe touches on some of these hallmarks out in the ecosystem. What really sets us apart? And also maybe a little bit about ExtendME and the quality of their laboratory and just how they're working in terms of operations? Yeah,
I think I have not come across a genetic company as amazing as ExtendME. And I say that with a lot of experience. They don't cut corners. They're just like us, right? Mm-hmm. Well, at Premier Research Lab, they don't cut corners. They do the work. I mean, and doing a panel like this, you really have to put in hours and hours and hours to really dig into the SNPs that have the clinical backing. And so I've seen companies where they just kind of pull out research SNPs and SNPs that might be, we're not sure, but we'll put it in there. And it's confusing, and then it's not very reliable. And so I was really impressed that they have an excellent geneticist who I worked with, and some clinical nutritionists who did a lot of work to really pull out the clinical affirmations. And so, for me, it was like, wow, this is the way this should be done. That's what I think of with supplementation and PRL. And so, looking at the panels and what we've done with them, I go back to that we're just really trying to elevate and really get into the clinical science, the cutting edge. Okay, so there are panels out there, and they are those kind of cookie cutter, right? So it's more general things, like you'll see the MTHFR, and you'll see a lot of things that even 23andMe did in the beginning. So glutathione SNPs and things like that. And of course, that's important, and that's more of like again a foundational. And I don't think they compete well. I don't think that going and doing some, or if your patient has already done some sort of foundational panel, I think that's great. It just adds to it. But really with longevity, it's like, what is going to take us off this planet? It's the 4 horsemen of death, right? Mm-hmm. And let's back up. So if the 4 horsemen of death are coming, and we know why they're coming because of the 12 hallmarks of aging, let's be very preventative and let's tackle those. So this fits in everywhere. This panel fits in with, again, the preventative strategies. And I think that's actually the most foundational thing that you can do. It's great that you know if you have MTHFR or not, but this panel goes in deeper. Now, overlap. So from what I've seen with our panel, there's not a whole lot of overlap between what other foundational genetic companies are doing. We looked at a whole another host of SNPs in areas that actually I had never seen before. There was some overlap in perhaps someone, a different panel, a different company rather, would pull autophagy SNP. So they pull like the ATG SNP. But we went in and found many autophagy SNPs because we don't make decisions, clinical decisions based on one gene. I don't think that's very accurate. That's kind of shooting in the dark. And so many of our SNPs, again, are completely novel. Some are included, so like chronic inflammation. I see a lot of other panels doing like one SNP on that, perhaps like the IL-6 receptor, but we have a ton of them. So if you look at all of them and you're like, wow, you have a lot of polymorphisms here, that gives you a better idea. I think it's more comprehensive than just one, maybe just a couple SNPs in there. Because we do have, for nutrient sensing deregulation, we do have the SNPs that would parlay a person to be low in magnesium, right? And so some other panels might have that in there, but again, that's so foundational, right? It's, when you have low magnesium, your mitochondria don't work. So there are a little bit of overlap, but again, our panel is so much above that and really aims on that prevention side. That's
so cool. Do you have a favorite SNP? Like just going through the research that like you were like, wow, I've never looked at this before. Why haven't I read about this before? But we really should be looking at that. Is there one that just comes to mind that you were fascinated by in your work around the panel?
I really like the ATG was obviously like one of my favorites. So it was like, oh, glad to see that one. Good old friend, like that's obviously very important. But the one that really blew my mind is the TERT. So that encodes for the catalytic subunit of telomerase. So telomerase is responsible for maintaining your telomeres, right? Mm-hmm. Cortisol is the enemy of your telomeres. And we are living in a very stressed out society, right? So if you have this SNP, you have to really be on top of your stress. You have to really track your HRV, really train your vagus nerve like you train your body. Keep an eye on your cortisol, because this one, if it's ramped up, you are chewing through all of your telomeres, which shifts them in to being senescent cells, which are zombie cells, which spew out inflammagens all over your body. So I'm like, whoa, this one is so important for the day and age we live in that this SNP really blew my mind. And so if you see the TERT, it's just like flashing lights, like you need to do everything, like get on our adaptogens, like really do meditation, like your life depends on it because it may.
Yeah, it's a good point. And, truthfully, I think it's so insightful to be able to take this test and because we can't do everything necessarily all at once. I mean, we'd like to think we can, but truthfully, whenever we're starting kind of a lifestyle change, it's one domino kind of after the next. And, knowing that you're potentially just creating all these zombie cells, which are just spewing inflammatory cytokines everywhere. It's like, I definitely want to fix that first versus something else.
Yeah, seems really important.
Seems really important. Yeah, feels really important. Well, any like additional words of wisdom? I mean, it's so exciting to have this panel and to be featuring this, and like practitioners listening, I really encourage you all to maybe try it yourself, because that's the best way to get insights of how you can maybe apply it in practice. But Dr. Kelly, is there anything that you maybe wanted to share in terms of closing and words of wisdom around the panel?
Yeah, I think this is just a very powerful tool that I wanted to create for probably 8 or 9 years. And I'm so elated that we have this, because it's really enabling us to step up and personalize and get ahead. And really, prevention is everything, right? We really want to not be treating diseases that we have down the road. We want a very long and healthy lifespan. And I just feel like this is a tool that that is doing that, and we're excited to bring it to the masses. And I'm going to be gifting this to everyone for their birthdays and Christmas and every holiday. That I love you so much, and here's your genetic panel that we're going to help to avoid chronic disease.
That's a beautiful gift that only keeps on giving for many, many years to come.
Right.
They of course has to put the wisdom into practice, but hey, at least if you shared the knowledge with them, if nothing else. But and for those that were listening and you're really called to purchase the panel, know that we have an entire partner ecosystem at prlabs.com. You can look for ExtendME, which is the partner that Kelly so eloquently worked with to build this panel, and we'll have all the details of how you can purchase, whether that's the basic or the advanced, on prlabs.com under that partner page. So, Dr. Kelly, I just want to thank you so much for being a steward of health and building this panel. I know it was hours and hours of work, and the passion, it just translates through this conversation here. And I know anytime anybody else is going to be interacting with you or you're gifting that panel, they're going to feel that too. So thank you so much for your work on this, and thank you for sharing just your passion with us today.
Thanks, Will. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll hope to see you next time on our Premier Living podcast.
Between the stress at the office and juggling my kids' soccer schedule, my energy was running on empty. Then, I found Premier Research Labs, and they've been trusted by health practitioners for more than 35 years. Now, I have the energy I had 10 years ago. I'm finally sleeping through the night, and with their digestive support, I've even shed a few pounds. Plus, Premier Research Labs products are made in the U.S. with top-quality natural ingredients and cutting-edge science. I found them on Amazon, but you can learn more about them if you visit prlabs.com today and start your journey to feeling your best.